Hey guys, and welcome back to another video, this time a Pokemon top 10 that's sure to stir plenty of controversy. Since the beginning way back in Pokemon Red and Blue, the thought of legendary Pokemon, these great creatures of myth and power, joining our humble teams has encouraged us players to go above and beyond in tracking, capturing, and training these special Pokemon. While many of us coveted their typically higher average stats and special moves, another motivating factor was just how cool they were. No doubt about it, the rarity, power, and design of legendary Pokemon are what really sets them apart. Still, with so many years of Pokemon, and the number of legendaries out there exploding with each new generation, not all have been home runs. Today, let's look at the top 10 Pokemon who just shouldn't even be considered legendary. Before we begin, let's go over exactly how I'll be gauging each legendary and determining their lack of legendariness. First, what is a legendary Pokemon? Well, the definition has sort of changed over the years, with Gens 1 through 5 basically including any Pokemon from a game's myth, with only one available in the world without the ability to evolve, breed, and without gender. However, that definition has since changed, and legendaries are sort of their own separate class. In essence, legendary Pokemon are rare, but not to the point that there's only like one member of the species left. They're just really strong, really rare Pokemon that make an impact on the story of the game, and can be captured by normal means in said game. I'll be gauging these legendary Pokemon based on two different categories, their stats and their design. We're looking for Pokemon with stats unbecoming of a legendary, while also adding in a more subjective aspect, their appearance. We as players know what looks cool, and while that can change from person to person, a lot of us would agree on what exactly makes a legendary look so legendary. So with all that laid out, let's begin the countdown of the Pokemon who just shouldn't be considered as legendary. In Gen 3, we were introduced to the iconic legendary trio of Hoenn, echoing the legendary beasts from Gen 2 and, of course, the legendary birds in Gen 1. However, the design of these legendaries was lackluster, and one in particular was a major yikes. Lacking any type of cool factor outside of the fact that it's literally made of ice, this of course being Regice, the iceberg Pokemon. Look, I'm not trying to yuck your yum, but I can't get behind a floating collection of ice crystals with little pins for legs. It just isn't an interesting design for a legendary Pokemon. Outside of its aesthetic, Regice makes this list. Regice makes the list rather than its compatriots because of its awful stat distribution. Now, I'm no pro, but 200 in special defense at the cost of terrible HP, attack, speed, and mediocre defense, and even low special attack, leaves Regice as one of the least legendary Pokemon still considered in this category. Most players already know by now that each generation loves to have some sort of trio gang of legendary Pokemon meant to push the specific story of that region. In Sinnoh, this was no different, with their Lake Guardian legends, which any one of could have been on this list, but we went with what we believe is the worst of the batch, Uxie, the knowledge Pokemon. Design-wise, it's basically an Abra. Its eyes are often closed as it's a passive keeper of knowledge throughout the region. As a quote-unquote fairy legendary, its design is meant to be cute and childlike, but it looks like they ran out of ideas on how to make that interesting. On top of its forgettable look, Uxie's stats heavily favor defense over offense, sporting some of the lowest health, attack, and special attack numbers in the legendary pool. So you won't be winning many battles with Uxie here. As more and more legendary Pokemon were revealed with each passing generation of Pokemon, the bar for aesthetic design seemed to be lower and lower. This, to me, came to a head in Black and White with the addition of the Forces of Nature trio, the worst of which being Tornadus, the Cyclone Pokemon. This is the first legendary on my list that I believe should be disqualified based on appearance alone, as its stats, not being impressive, are at least more tolerable with its high speed and special attack. No, its stats aren't the issue here, just look at this Pokemon. Most of the time, in its base form, it's a floating green genie with a purple octopus tail. Its lower body is literally just a cloud. I know the others in the trio share a very similar design, but they also have a different form, known as their Therian form, which is activated with the use of the Reveal Glass item, turning these odd humanoid Pokemon to a more familiar animal design. Tornadus doesn't improve much though, taking this hideous green parrot shape. This is a major yikes. From that still dumb purple tentacle tail, to the fact that it doesn't really have a beak or face in general. Tornadus just doesn't have the look of a legendary Pokemon. Black and White didn't see a lot of love from fans, and as seen in the previous Pokemon, that wasn't helped by its questionable choices in Legends for this generation. Adding to that stigma is Virizion, the grassland Pokemon. A member of yet another trio in Gen 5, which was just jam-packed with legendary Pokemon. Virizion is a grass and fighting type Pokemon that's a deer. Yep, a fighting deer. Design-wise, this thing lacks any type of real imagination. It has horns with an edge, but it comes off as blunted and dull. These weird long sock hooves, and just green spikes tilted back to make it seem like it's moving fast. What gets me the most though, and this can be said about all of these Swords of Justice trio, is this little smirk they had to give this Pokemon. Please, I don't need an edgy Sonic sidekick as a legendary Pokemon. Though even in that, looking at its stats, its speed isn't impressive, and it's got low, well, everything else, aside from special defense. All in all, it's certainly one of my least favorite and unimpressive legendary Pokemon of all time. Pokemon Sun and Moon certainly had a strange cast of legendary Pokemon, and at least one of them I don't think should have been counted among them at all. Despite what it would eventually become, Cosmog, the Nebula Pokemon, just shouldn't be classified as a legendary. We can skip over the fact that this thing from the start to level 53 has just horrendous stats and moves that it's almost a pain that this gets any attention at all. But the real reason I feel like this just can't be qualified as a legendary is the fact that it evolves at all. It has two stages of evolution, evolving at 43 to Cosmoem, another forgetful legendary, and then again at level 53 to the major legends of Solgaleo and Lunala, depending on which game you're playing. One of the chief characteristics of a legendary Pokemon is its inability to evolve, and yes, I understand there are some exceptions out there and some form changes that exist, but Cosmog is an egregious outlier to that rule. The fact that it evolves multiple times, eventually getting to the title legendaries of this generation, is just too much for me to consider it a true legend in the game. Yet it's only number 6, because I know many who can argue against this point. And believe me, if this was a form change or something like that, I probably would have excluded it from this list altogether. Oh well. The include of any legendary Pokemon from Gen 2 pains me deeply, as I feel like these were some of the best designed Pokemon we ever got. Maybe I'm looking back with nostalgia, but the legendary beasts, being such a pain to catch, were some of the most rewarding legends in the game's history. Despite that, and looking past my own bias, during the time of their generation, Entei, the volcano Pokemon, was really outshined by the others in Gen 2. Now, don't get me wrong, the design of Entei, like the other legendary beasts, is on point. You won't find me complaining about that in this video. The problem of its legendary status actually comes from its stat distribution and move pool, especially in the vacuum of Gen 2. Entei was a unique fire-type legend with poor special stats but high attack. This wouldn't be a problem today, but back then, Entei just didn't learn any moves that utilized either its typing or primary stats. It was basically just a big beefy wall, major yikes when compared to the effectiveness of the other legendary beasts. This may be my most controversial include on this list, but at least in a Gen 2 vacuum, Entei could have easily been counted out of the legendary category. In Gen 3, we welcomed a new duo pair of legendary Pokemon, of a very interesting typing, Dragon and Psychic. Sounds like a real kick-ass design was sure to follow, right? Well, not exactly, for what we got were Latias and Latios, the Eon Pokemon. For the sake of this list, I'll actually just be counting Latias, because it has a worse stat distribution, but both Pokemon share a very similar design choice, which I feel is the real disqualifying factor for their legendary classification. First, its stats. When compared to Latias is the more defensively focused of the two, meaning players tend to prefer the heavier punch Latios brings to a team, while both actually sported an impressive speed stat. This makes sense as Latios is designed after a jet aircraft, like a dragon jet hybrid. That's right, the dragon psychic type Pokemon is modeled after an airplane. This is the root of my grievance with Latias. This thing looks really dumb. It's a happy plane, something you'd likely find in Thomas the Train Engine, like its flying buddy. Tiny arms, pivoted wings that sit on its ass, quirky smile. Yep, all the things I just hate to see on any Pokemon, let alone a legendary. To my surprise, when Latias got a Mega Evolution, I thought there would be some hope for its design. But nope, it wasn't saved. In fact, I think it got even worse. I mean, what are those forearms though? Is it flying backwards? It's a mess, and just one of the worst legends in Pokemon. X and Y certainly wasn't my favorite generation, and that's reflected in one of its chief legendary Pokemon, Zygarde, the Order Pokemon. Where do I begin with the design of this thing? Introduced in Gen 6 with its 50% form, I was left scratching my head at what I could only describe as a green slug peacock thing. Sure, its stats were fine, its typing even better, but I couldn't get past how clunky this thing looked. Things were only made worse as different versions or forms of this Pokemon were introduced in Gen 7 Sun and Moon. We got the pseudo-unevolved state of Zygarde 10%, which, oddly enough, is a dog now? This space dog evolves into the slug we saw earlier, which is its 50% form. Then we got to the granddaddy of Zygarde Complete, which is, I just don't know. If you were to ask me, I'd say this was a Digimon from the early 2000s, but nope, this is a legendary Pokemon from today. Its high HP and decent stats make it a strong Pokemon to be sure, but its design, all of its designs from the Space Dog to the humanoid Digimon, just leave me wishing this wasn't a legendary at all. In the classification of Pokemon and their legendary status, there are those more exclusive, giving them the title of Mythic. However, such a category shouldn't be given to the Sea Drifter Pokemon Phione from Generation 4. This Pokemon has Yikesville stats, 80 across the board, with no other alternate forms or anything else to support its weak move pool. Not only is it unimpressive in battle, its design doesn't hold water either. And yes, that is a pun because 80% of this thing's body is in fact water. Really though, even as a mythical Pokemon, Phione just doesn't have any features that allow it to stand out. It has a flipper bell, fairy looking thing with a smile. And there you go, sketch artists, you've drawn the exact copy of Phione. Still, the greatest reason I feel like this just isn't a mythical or even a legendary Pokemon is actually the way you obtain it. You have to first catch Manaphy, a mythical Pokemon very similar in design, but with slightly higher stats, breed it with a Ditto, and the resulting egg will get you a Phione. You caught that, right? You literally have to breed another mythic Pokemon to make just a weaker version of it. First, breeding just isn't a thing for a vast majority of legends, but not only can its parent do this, but so can Phione. The oddest thing about all this legendary breeding is that mating a Phione with a Ditto will only make more Phiones. There's actually no way to loop back around to Manaphy, which I guess makes it more of a legendary Pokemon than Phione, leaving this Pokemon at number 2 on our list. The hate for Gen 4 Legends continues. We saw another member of Hoenn's legendary Titan trio on this list, Regice, and now we see its master, Regigigas, the colossal Pokemon. Man, this thing is a massive yikes. You'd think the legendary of 3 other legendary Pokemon of such great myth, despite being sort of blah, would be at least interesting. Maybe a combination of all 3, right? Well, we don't see much of any of the other Titan legends in Regigigas, but we do get some grass? It's like a computer that was thrown into a bush. So the boring design that makes no sense in context to the other Titans? Check. Oh, and that grass around its feet really conflicts with its normal typing. But okay, fine. What about its stats? Surely that will make up for it, right? Well, yes, its stats are very impressive, but good luck ever getting to see them in action. Regigigas has the ability Slow Start, cutting its speed in half for several turns. It's likely to fall before you even get a single move off. Regigigas could have been a great legendary Pokemon, a true leader of other legends from the past generations, but it falls far, far short of that potential and should fall off of the legendary list. And well, you guys, there you have it, the least legendary legends in Pokemon. In this list, I probably trampled on some of your favorite Pokemon, and now I pass it to you in the comments to defend these Pokemon's legendary status. I doubt there is anyone who actually cares about Latias, but still, let me know if you think I missed any Pokemon who deserve to be on this list, or included any you feel are unjustified. If you enjoyed the video, help us out by leaving it a like and subscribing so you never miss out on a new video. As always guys, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, see ya.